What really is a high-level thinker? The answer to this question is so profound because your entire life depends on it. Actually, it's about our entire human civilization. But most people don't know how to think because they care more about their ego than truth. You can feel when someone is a high-level thinker because they're likely smarter than you, less delusional, and therefore live happier lives. But most people prefer the delusions over truth. And there's nothing more delusional than living a life you don't want to live. You're probably well aware, as I am, that we, as like a human collective, are deeply unsatisfied right now. We live in the most technologically advanced times, but spiritually we feel stuck. We are living mediocre, unhealthy lives, and we're not realizing that it's only because of the way we think. So in this video, I've compiled all ways of thinking into this one giant project. This is my own framework I developed over my 26 years of life. I integrated science, psychology, philosophy, and spirituality into this one giant framework, so that after this, you will think more intelligently, live a more authentic life, and even pave the way towards your enlightenment. Now I know this all sounds very pretentious and abstract, which makes it fascinating. Do I believe to be some genius who has it figured all out already? Well, yes. I mean, of course not really. It's not that I don't have much more to learn, and I'm certain that there is so much more growth ahead of me. But fundamentally, I feel complete in my view of reality. I found a perspective that is whole, and I will show you why. Before we can understand higher levels of thinking, we need to get honest with our foundation. Because the fact of the matter is that you are not in control of your thoughts at all. What you think are your thoughts have been programmed into you by those that have power over you. And yeah, I'm mainly talking about your parents and your culture. They have basically made you. Everybody in this self-development, spirituality, self-improvement space wants to be free of the current version of themselves. Like, we all envision a better version of us and then try to aim towards it. But how does this make any sense? How are you supposed to be better than what you are? So, of course, you wake up each morning as the same person. So you are living the same life and taking the same decisions. It's like you're stuck in a thought loop. Your subconscious mind has already built a story around your life and who you are. And every time you wake up, the story basically gets uploaded again into your mind. And you don't think much about it, but it's there and it's controlling everything you do. In a weird way, other people have told you who you are and you believed them. So it's your environment that has put you in your current life situation, and then you keep reinforcing it by telling yourself every day the same story about who you are and what you're capable of. All your doubts and regrets, all the fears that you have. All of this is just limiting you because you believe it's actually true. You believe it's a part of you. So you're limiting your thinking and therefore limiting who you are. This is the delusion of your ego. But it's harder to face the truth than to live in delusion, because we humans actually like our lives. They are much more comfortable, because being stuck feels much more comfortable than stretching the limits of your identity. I relate to this a lot because I was a Christian when I was younger. My belief in God grounded me. Like, it was such an existential peace to know that there's a God that cares and loves for you and has kind of guided you towards your life. And then when I started to realize that this God I was believing in wasn't quite real, it was quite an existential hand grenade. After this, I started to gain this philosophical obsession about finding out the nature of truth itself. And I know throughout this path that being wrong is brutal. It hurts to be wrong because it's part of our identity. Luckily, growing older, I realized that all ideologies have the same problem as Christianity has. I discovered that absolute reality, absolute truth, is not a belief, and it's not an ideology either. Truth can be directly accessed, but most people never find this out, because when you're overly mystical, you neglect science. And when you're overly scientific, you dismiss the mystical. Only if you know how to think on all levels, you're truly free. Because then you can shape your reality to who you genuinely want to be. You become way smarter in everyday life, because you can see how other people really think, what their intentions are, and when they're lying to themselves. You then can see that because you've seen your own lies thousands of times before. Self-awareness is merely the ability to detect your own lies. But the biggest lie you're likely falling into is the belief that you are your thoughts. Science can't tell us what a thought is. Of course, it's tempting to just reduce it to synapses firing in your brain, but that's just wrong. It's like when people say that love is just a chemical reaction in the brain. When you're doing this, you're just confusing a concept with lived reality. Love is much more meaningful than that. The same is true for your thoughts. If we weren't so used to hearing voices in our head all the time, we would see how odd it is to think. It's a uniquely human experience. And when you focus on this experience of thinking itself, it becomes quite evident how ungraspable thoughts are. Because they're kind of like sound, but you can't really hear them. You can't exactly tell when or where they are happening either. And even more important, they are totally unpredictable. You can't ever predict what you will think next. Thoughts just berate you as if they have a mind of their own. This is such a big deal to realize, because this means that what you think you are is forced upon you. The same way your lungs breathe for you, your brain thinks for you. You're just witnessing these thoughts. And this is quite scary, because our thoughts literally shape our entire life and our sense of identity. So if you don't control something so important, it seems you have no control of your life at all. In a weird way, I'm taking away everything you have accomplished and will accomplish in your entire life if you believe what I say to be true. And also notice that if what I'm saying is true, it makes perfect sense why the ego would prefer delusion. It's just really uncomfortable to confront that. But the only thing you really control is what you pay attention to. That's why thinking about thinking will set you free. Higher level thinkers focus on thoughts that make them smarter and more fulfilled. Because the power that you have is to direct intention to a thought, to categorize a thought as important or unimportant, to hold on to a thought or to just let go of it. Because if you're self-aware, you're observing the thoughts that your brain generates with care and consideration, but without ever identifying with them. Then you can actually think how to think, because now you're a step removed from the thought process. Now you're something else that is looking over the thought process itself. This way you can realize that high-quality thoughts are being cultivated. You don't have just some magical free will that suddenly gives you a genius idea and then your life suddenly changes. It's something that takes time and deliberate decision making. For example, you could have the desire to lose weight. And if you're smart, you will avoid buying chocolate because you know that once you see the chocolate in your kitchen, you think about eating it and then you eat it. The same way, if you have a very cluttered room and then you go and clean your room, you'll have a more clear mind. Because your mind is really a product of your circumstances. Go and clean your room, kids. The mistake that we make is that we think that reality is made out of our words. But animals do not live in the same world of thought and language. We believe that this human-constructed language world is objective reality, but it's not. Each word is a false representation of a real thing. You can say chair, but we only know what a chair is when we see it. If I ask you to define what a chair is, you will quickly get into trouble, because there's literally no element that all chairs have to have in common. For example, you might say that a chair is something with 4 legs, but the chair that I'm sitting on right now has 5 legs. Okay, so a chair is something you can sit on at least, right? Okay, so now my bed is also a chair. That's also where we get into very fun political debates of what is a woman? It's a societal construct. You can't really define it. The only question is if we agree on our definitions. If one person starts to claim that there's a difference between their gender and their genitals, there's no way you'll find objective ground, because the definitions never were objective in the first place. Definitions only appear as objective as long as we agree. And it's because we socially construct them. You only need to talk to a trans person in person, and all your assumptions go straight out the window, because you won't be able to tell what gender they are, and your rigid, small definitions won't fit. All this to say, to truly know what a chair is, you need to find one and sit on it. Language is always one step removed from reality. This is so crucial to understand, because this way you actually can relate much more flexibly with your thoughts. You won't get lost in their content. You understand that a thought or like a word is made out of associations. That's also how AI understands language. AI doesn't have definitions for the words. AI simply knows which words are associated with which meanings. And this is really the superpower of humanity. This ability to abstract reality into concepts is really magical. All human creation, like everything you see, the way you're watching this video right now, and everything we use are a product of some person's thoughts. And most good habits like journaling, meditating, introspecting, all require high-level thinking to be effective in. So we think to construct narratives of the world. And then these narratives, like these stories, become real in our minds. That's what we're doing here right now. That's how we relate to each other and reality as a whole. And we want these stories to be real. We really are attached to the idea of this human construct to be really, really important, as if it was permanent. But there will always be an impermanent thing in an impermanent world. It's completely fabricated. And all it takes is to close your eyes, fall asleep, and nothing of it matters anymore. So language is a construct, thoughts are not reality, and you are not your thoughts. But don't misunderstand. Other people will treat you as if you are your thoughts. They will judge you for them, harshly. We do it all the time. And then if you get emotionally affected, then you'll judge yourself. And this judgment will cause an identification with the thought again, causing you to make inauthentic decisions. So keep reminding yourself, no thought can ever define you. You are an infinite shapeshifter. When I get to know somebody, I care far more about what their thought process is like than if what they say is true. As long as their thought process cares about truth over their own ego, I'll probably like them. It's rare to find people who genuinely know how to think critically. Most people nowadays are just ideologically poisoned. So to take thinking about thinking to the next level, we want to reflect deeply on what it means to think critically. Everybody loves the aesthetic of critical thinking. It just seems so smart and sophisticated. But instead of stroking our own egos, I want to make very clear of what would make you not a critical thinker. If you believe in giant conspiracy theories, like that the moon landing was fake, you're likely not a critical thinker. If you disbelieve everything official because it's from the establishment, you're likely not a critical thinker. And if you believe that science and rationality are the only way towards truth, you're not a critical thinker. But if you're able to question what I just said, while still maintaining an open mind for new ideas, you're thinking critically right now. This was clearly meant to be a bit provocative, but I stand by what I say, and I will cover why believing in these ideas is indicative of a bad thought process during this video. But of course, everything I say could be wrong. How the hell do you know if I know what I'm talking about? You can question everything forever if you want to, and then you'll never find out what's true, because you'll just be paralyzed in your own doubt and mistrust. And if you disagree with me, well, then it's very easy to just dismiss everything else that I have to say. But honestly, this would just prove my point. I'm inviting you to judge me here. That's at the end the point of all of this, right? To make you think. If something doesn't make sense to you, the comment section is yours. Most people who call themselves critical thinkers or like skeptics are mainly distrustful and paranoid. Many skeptics simply disbelieve everything that is just too status quo, or they act as if, it is impossible to be certain about anything. It's almost like some sort of epistemological nihilism, where truth in itself is denied as something that doesn't exist, which is a horrible trap to fall down towards. Skepticism is only beneficial if you can be skeptical towards your own skepticism. If you can't, you will never find truth. You'll be forever doubtful and paralyzed in your overthinking. But there is a smart intuition in questioning everything. Critical thinking is questioning even the most obvious knowledge. And this instinct to be skeptical is a sign of intelligence. Most assumptions need to get questioned and destroyed to create genuine change. Maybe you discover that time is actually relative and you revolutionize modern physics forever. So it's not wrong to question the establishment or to wonder if the moon landing was fake. The real problem with most conspiracy theories is just that their claims are so ridiculous and require so many moving parts that the only way you can justify believing in them is just paranoia. They are way too unrealistic. It's always more likely that, you're losing it. The reason why conspiracy theories are so unpopular nowadays is precisely because people struggle so much with critical thinking. Misinformation right now is a virus, and it's fueled by uncertainty and distrust for authorities. Intelligence is to recognize when you have no idea what the hell you're talking about, and when it's time to listen and to learn. It requires humility towards your own mind. Realizing that you have been fooled by your own mind is the real conspiracy going on here. And this reaches far beyond just conspiracy theories and belief systems. So when you can admit that you were wrong about something, which is something that very few people can do nowadays, you're thinking critically. Those who can't do that will forever be stuck in the delusional narratives. The thought processes that you have are therefore more important than being right or wrong about any particular issue, because then you can actually be right more often in the future, and you don't need to rely on other people to tell you what's the truth, because you can simply see it. Truth is not something you believe in, it's recognized. And the best way to do this is through first principles thinking. Okay, so people make very bad assumptions, and they hurt them their entire lives. Assumptions are like learned lessons that haven't been proven. For example, people get cheated on once, and now all women are money-hungry bitches who cannot be trusted. You destroy all possibility for a genuine future connection because of one bad experience you've had. And this one bad experience now informs the rest of your entire life. Assumptions always come from limited experience. You believe that you already have found truth, but it's actually just a belief. But believing in that makes life simpler to navigate, because it hurts to be wrong. I had assumed that it is impossible for me to become smarter or find a purpose and meaning in life. I struggled a lot with ADHD in school, and I was sure that I'm just dumber than my peers. I didn't believe that I could change how I was, and it didn't really feel like I had any particular talents or I just felt very mediocre in everything I was doing. Because every time I tried, I was disappointed in myself. And this is how all assumptions sneak into your mind and slowly destroy you from the inside. The point of first principle thinking is about detecting and destroying these assumptions to start your mind off completely fresh. But this mode of thinking requires radical open-mindedness. If you identify with one of your assumptions, you'll find it almost impossible to break free from them. That's why we need to get a step removed from our thoughts first. First principle thinking is kind of like a scientific approach. It means to boil down a problem to what you know for certain to be true. And then you reason up from there. But spirituality also uses first principle thinking. But instead of using experience to find out how to manipulate physical reality, it uses experience as the ground of truth itself. So it uses experience instead of physics. But thinking this way is not common. Most people do things because everybody else does them in a certain way, or because things always have been done in a certain way. And being the one who changes things is not very comfortable, as it makes you stick out. And even for yourself, your identity shift will become quite stark. So let's say you wonder how to be more intelligent and you want to understand how to think better. Applying first principle thinking, you could question what a thought really is, break thinking itself down into its components, and then start from there. So this is the approach that I have used for this entire video. But that's still very abstract. So how about we take a more practical question and then apply first principle thinking there. So what do you want your life to look like? That's always a good question to ask yourself. So as an answer on the first layer, you might respond with simple themes. You can answer, I want to have lots of money. I want good health and loving relationships. Quite meaningful things. But this isn't thinking deep enough. So we can get a level more specific and say, I want to become a millionaire. I want to become enlightened. Or I want to have a beautiful wife with children. Okay, of course, we are still very far removed from like some practical steps, but it's now quite specific enough because here, most people start to see a lot of assumptions come up. For example, I'm not disciplined enough to become a millionaire. Enlightenment doesn't exist, and if it does, it's just for like weird hardcore monks. Or I won't ever find a wife because all women are bitches and cannot be trusted. I strongly recommend you take a pen and paper or just a note document on your PC, it really doesn't matter, and you start writing. What is it that you really want? And what are the ideas that are preventing you from taking the next step? Like actually take some time to think out loud and to write it down. And then see what comes up as like things you are certain to be true. And then question them. Sometimes it can be really stupid things, like you want to get in shape and you want to go out for a run. But you can't go right now because it's 8 o'clock already and you need to buy running shoes first. No, you don't. There's almost always some solutions and compromises you can find with almost any excuse you're going to put in front of your goals. And then questioning these like weird barriers you put on yourself is what will move you not just closer to your goals, but to destroy these assumptions that are really, holding you hostage. And this is how also you cultivate good thoughts. Because it's not really about achieving anything. It's just to wire like the dopamine receptors in your brain, like the dopamine is the chemical for motivation. Whenever you have a thought, like I want to go for a run, and then you go for a run, even if it's just 5 minutes, you're strengthening the dopamine pathways in the brain. So it's going to become a habit, right? It's going to become something more common the more you do it. So it's not even a matter about running like a half marathon. It's more about just doing something. So whenever you want to know if something is true, using first principle thinking, you want to go to the source. And with many questions of personal development, like you are the source. You need to test out your own assumptions and see if they are true for you. Nobody else can do this work for you. Going to the source is also the solution to misinformation. So find people who know more and find trustable sources who just not align with any specific bias, or you find multiple sources with different biases, and then if both of them say the same thing, it's likely that yeah, they have something akin to the truth, and it's okay to believe in it. For now. But even these beliefs, they can be completely temporary. At the end, you still want to be a skeptic, and at any point, you can find new information that contradicts what you thought to know. Maybe you went running without running shoes, and now you have blisters on your feet. Your feet hurt, and you're like, God damn it, this was wrong advice. Well, then forget what I said. But you still needed to run to find it out. And it's still good that you did it. Double win. You can hold most knowledge as a type of assumption in your head. You should believe what is most likely to be true in any given moment until it isn't anymore. As long as you don't attach your sense of identity to something you believe in, it's quite easy to remain open-minded and to just change your mind when a new way is just better for you. This is a mentality of lifelong learning. It requires awareness and intellectual humility. As long as you have this mentality, I'm sure you'll master life. But if you're an overthinker and you never make a choice, you probably just have way too many assumptions in your head, and you don't actually test them out. Anxiety is just uncertainty from too many options. Cut those down and then make your choice. Being wrong is making progress. But reality is way too complex to think in first principles every time. Your mind takes up way too many resources. So the difficulty is to understand why sometimes are you able to question yourself and apply first principles thinking, and why sometimes you fall back into just very lazy old thought patterns. To manage your mind well, you want to understand the two thinking systems of the brain. You also want to subscribe for more in-depth content. This is my own philosophized interpretation of Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman's work from the best-selling book Thinking Fast and Slow. So our brain has two thinking systems, fast system 1 and slow system 2. Your entire life, other people have exploited your system 1 thinking brain. Because system 1 thinking is automatic, quick, and easy. It's our default. Those in power know that the most people don't like to put effort into their thoughts. This is why all of media is spoon-feeding us information. You don't just have a phone. You have a casino in your pocket. Instead of pulling a lever for money, you're scrolling with your thumb for excitement and novelty. And instead of paying with money, you're paying with your time and attention. This is the main mechanism that is suppressing all our negative emotion. Like collectively as a society, we are not reflecting and introspecting anymore because we can deeply pick out the phone or engage with some type of screen that distracts us. So we have always a way to fall back into comfort. So you never need to use system 2. Gambling addicts go to the casino to suppress negative emotions, but most of society just simply uses their phone. For example, what is 2 plus 2? The answer jumps into your mind so quickly you don't need to think. This is system 1. But if I ask you a more ambiguous question like, what would you have to do to stop being so mediocre and finally live your dream life? Now you need to pause what you're doing and reflect deeply on what the answer to this question really means. If you want an actual impactful answer, there might be negative emotions involved you have to deal with. So now system 1 needs to push the question to system 2. And system 2 is slow and methodical. It analyzes specific problems. When you first learn to drive a car, for example, you need system 2 to learn. It is very mentally taxing. But once you got it, system 1 takes over, and now it's automatic. Now you don't even have to think about it. Therefore, whenever you're learning or have some original idea, it's likely system 2. And whenever you're multitasking, like you're playing a video game and watching YouTube videos on the second screen, well, now you're using more of system 1. But sometimes slow system 2 gets corrupted by fast system 1 assumptions. For example, you might try to reflect on how to become a better person, but you notice that it's really hard to even start to self-reflect because you don't really believe that anything is going to come of it anyway. Because even before starting the process, your brain has already made the calculation if trying something new is worth it. And it came to the conclusion it's not. and it happened before the thought even arised. So you rather do not get disappointed in yourself again and dismiss any type of advancements completely. So you don't even have to try. That's how years of life get wasted. This is very much true for thoughts like, I won't ever find a wife, or I won't ever find a girlfriend. I'll never make this career work, or the world is going to shit anyway. These are all system 1 thoughts that appear as profound and sophisticated, but they're not. They're simply lazy and comfortable. They train your brain to think worse and become less intelligent, frankly. System 1 isn't looking for truth. It only looks for what is more energy efficient. And locking yourself in your room all day and not interacting with the outside world is very energy efficient. The mind is like a network of ideas, and one belief is connected to the entire network of the mind. And moving out one piece makes the entire house of cards fall down. This is why consuming the same content about reaffirming our beliefs becomes like an addiction. We want to feed into this construct. So doubting it becomes dangerous for our entire sense of self. This is where we get stuck. You just need to look at it. Right now, there are huge online economies only to feed you negative information about the world. They exist only to strengthen your biases and your belief of lack of power, so that you don't even have to try. System 1 is happy. Because System 1 only wants to confirm what it already thinks it knows. It's like a collector of assumptions. The more assumptions you collect, the less you need to think, the less effort you need to put into your life. What a horrible, horrible bind our mind puts us in. The ego basically gets wrapped up in a feeling that it has some unique knowledge about the world. It senses distrust as intelligence because it's very efficient. And if you don't trust that the world can change or that you can change, then inaction becomes the smart move. Because why put in all of this effort if it's not worth it? Understanding how these systems play with each other is a huge step of using your mind more intelligently. Then despite of how negative all of this sounds and how our mind fools us the entire time, it's actually this ability to think about it and to talk about it that gives you the ability to notice it. And within this noticing, you can become free. So be very careful each time when you kind of want to self-reflect and System 1 takes over and suddenly you're watching YouTube videos again. This is really the mechanism that needs to be resolved. And despite this kind of negative picture of the mind that maybe I'm painting here, which is just one aspect, the good thing is that the solution is quite easy. It's simple. Because like I said before, the mind is like a house of cards. And it only takes one small change to make everything fall down. So this means that if you struggle with a certain behavior, be it social media addiction, you just need to ask a question when was the last time you did not open social media for a day or 2 days? Whatever your last record was of abstinence from whatever substance or drug or whatever, just try to beat that. Or if you've never gone for a run at 8 in the evening, well, then do it once. And now your mind has learned that you're actually capable of doing that. It's really a change in identity. You can form a narrative around it. I went running at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. or whatever. The only real failure is inaction. So once you act out these thought patterns, it is just super important that you don't compare yourself. Because comparison is always ego. It's always, who am I in comparison to this person or this thing? And look how not advanced I am. Look what a loser I am. It takes so much more to be where I want to be. So it is very ineffective to compare yourself to other people, and very, very effective to just compare yourself who you were yesterday or a week ago. And if you're doing this well, you can notice how quickly you can have the best time of your life in 2 weeks from now. And I'm not trying to fool you. It's really easy to just make a shift and be in a completely different state of mind. It just requires some different action. So sense your emotions like boredom, sadness, and anger as kind of like a guiding map, because they point to where system 2 needs to work on. So, yeah, figure out which assumptions block you, and through first principles thinking, figure out where these blockages happen, and then take the time to actually deal with them, self-reflect. Over time, you'll find out that it is very much worth it. And everybody is capable of doing this. It's your environment that is trying to push you down. So, breaking bad patterns and starting healthy ones is the most effective way, really, to change your way of thinking. Thinking about your mind in these systems will make it easier for you to awaken to your lies. Because the only way you can keep up an addiction is through lying to yourself. If you care about what's authentic to you, you'll put in the effort to be truthful and happier. I'm positive that you'll be able to do so, because it's in our human nature to strive and advance. Self-realization is really the destruction of all of the lies and delusions you tell yourself. And then living authentically is a full embrace of what is true. This is what you get when you go up to the higher levels of thinking. But before I become overly mystical, I want to be a bit more personal with you. I've always had like this deep philosophical obsession, and at the core it came down to finding out what is objectively true. A lot of my self-reflection happened when I smoked a ton of weed. I had abstract philosophical questions like, what is judgment? Is morality real? And what is the absolute nature of truth? I became obsessed about the nature of knowledge itself. I only cared about figuring out what is objectively true, something that doesn't depend on me as like a human. I wanted to destroy subjectivity. At the core, there was like an existential anxiety that made me question everything endlessly. So, to combat this anxiety and just existential unease, I developed kind of like a thought algorithm over many years. Like an internal dialogue tree in my head that tried to figure out what is true on any particular issue. So I spent hundreds of hours just in my room sitting and thinking. And I figured out that the same problem came up repeatedly. Sooner or later, I'd reach an irreconcilable contradiction. I could always argue both sides of an idea. There was no way to determine that one side was grounded in some objective truth and the other wasn't. For example, my reasoning convinced me that incest is not morally wrong, but rather morally neutral. There's nothing that makes it inherently bad. Like if two sisters had an intimate relationship, there's no argument against it except just personal disgust. These were the type of conclusions that I came to, and my head would judge me for them. Like I would judge myself for them. Like I didn't want to believe that. I wanted to find out why incest is inherently bad, for example. So I had arguments in my head about all types of moral dilemmas, and I felt judgment for my own conclusions. Because I imagined how other people would judge me if they knew I'd believe certain things. So, to combat that, I began to argue against people in my own head, fighting against arguments I think they'd make. But the issue always still was the same. A contradiction came up with no objective answer. Everything was relative to a person's preference. The arguments ended up being just one judgment clashing against another. But then I got it. Wait a minute. Are beliefs all about navigating social judgment? Is everybody just believing in things to appease other people? Because I could see this in myself, right? Before I could even form a genuine opinion, my mind always considered other people on the matter. They had a lot of power over my thinking. And this realization was when I started to truly think for myself, without appealing to any authority or what I heard somebody else say, but what I thought, what I cared about. I knew that this was important, and I felt like I came to truth a lot closer. But even without being influenced by others' judgments, I still recognized that it still was my own judgment that try to find truth. So it still was just my perspective. It still wasn't like the objectivity and the absolute truth I was looking for. It's like I wanted to not be human in a way, to just look at reality as some sort of alien. So I started to doubt that truth could be found in words altogether, and that it's all a matter just of subjective experience. And therefore, there was no need to feel judged at all. This is where my philosophy actually changed me. Because I became free, less socially anxious, more confident in myself. I saw that other people are constructs of my mind, and I'm a construct in theirs. Everybody only sees your shell, but they can never see you. No matter how much you talk to a person, how much you meet with the person, or how often you have sex with them, they are always interacting with a shell of you, because whatever is thinking is consistently changing. Everybody is just filtering judgments and perceptions through their own lens all the time. And who you are as a person can never be grasped. It's just too impermanent. There's no essence to anything. This felt lonely for a while. It hurt. I felt like nothing can ever fulfill me, and nothing can ever understand me, because it seems almost impossible to even understand myself, my own nature. So my perception of other people and myself shifted. I didn't care about being judged at all anymore. I actually liked it. It made me feel seen when people judged me. And in a way, every social interaction then became play. Other people's intentions were easy to figure out, and my own were also quite clear to myself. So my own opinions were more like a product of what aligned to my life and my circumstances. It was just a preference. And then when other people judge me, it's more like, oh, okay, now I understand. You're judging me for this because of your life experiences and your culture and your circumstances. So it was very easy to relativize everything, and nothing really touched me. Instead of thinking that anything is better or worse, it ultimately just became about being different. And if your differences didn't harmonize with mine, well, I didn't like you then. And I tried not to talk to you. This path made me believe that beliefs are meaningless. But the statement is yet another contradiction. God damn it. Because this runs deep. So I built a framework that included all beliefs of all people in my mind, while still having my own beliefs about the world, what I thought is best. You can see a breakdown of that in my self-destructive beliefs tier list video on this YouTube channel. I saw that the most fundamental truth that guides all of us is that unnecessary suffering is evil. Like, nobody wants to suffer, and it's just kind of like embedded in the nature of what suffering is. But beyond that, and what it really means to like suffer unnecessarily, was completely up for interpretation. But this way to see truth still doesn't feel right. Because if I jump off the balcony right now, there's a matter of fact in whether I die or survive. What you ought to do might be preferential, but there are clearly facts that change the outcome of a situation. And there's some reality we are all like agreeing on so that we can navigate this world. And knowing and not knowing these truths can be the difference between heaven and hell. So yeah, I had cleared out all types of social anxiety, but I still had a lot of hell in me. And after some psychedelic experiences, it became clear that there are truths that far supersede even my wildest imagination, realms beyond human comprehension that I couldn't fathom. Like, you cannot even imagine it. And I lived it, and I still can't imagine it. This was the level of truth that I was actually looking for all along. Transcending my human nature and awakening to even deeper level of self-awareness. I have a Discord community where we talk about spirituality and self-realization. We guide people there with personal development, and we have very interesting convos and voice chat. And My entire mission is to just facilitate self-realization and like a deeper understanding of yourself for a more fulfilling life. So you will miss out if you don't join. The link is in the description. The idea that everything is a perspective went far deeper than I thought. And talking about depth, let's actually talk about what it means to think deeply. When I look for spiritual content on YouTube, I'm bored by most channels I see. Everything I find lacks depth. It only tries to have the appearance of depth. It made me wonder, what's the nature of a deep thinker? And to demonstrate that, I'm going to give you a presentation of what is not deep. To transform your life, you need to change your frequencies. Make the frequencies of your perception align with your soul. Then you can channel the right vibrations into your reality. Then you can envision and manifest everything you want in your life. Of course, now I understand. Frequencies. This was the answer all along that I was missing. People have no idea what the hell they're talking about. They just picked up on these words and now just regurgitate them. These words function as what I like to call curiosity stoppers. Before we had an understanding of biology, there was a group called the Vitalists. They were a group of people who came up with biological words to explain how humans work. This started in the 1500s and persisted way into the 20th century. When the Vitalists got prompted with difficult questions like, what makes living things different from non-living things? The Vitalists came up with words like élan vital, the magical substance that gives life energy to biological organisms. It's a French word called basically vital force. This way, Vitalists could signal deep understanding where there was actually none, stopping the need to figure out how biology actually works. The mystery found in the questioning got basically mixed into the substance of the answer. It's kind of like the God of the Gaps argument. Why is there thunder? Well, it's Zeus. He's mad. Why does the universe exist? Of course, God made it exist. Lack of understanding gets embedded with a false notion of understanding by just using some simple wording. This is clearly not what depth is. Depth is found in the specificity of an idea. When an idea has a unique identity, it hits deep, because it zooms in on the details of meaning. Depth challenges assumptions and says something in a new way. Non-deep thinking only cares about the aesthetic of what is being said. It's all about the vibes, man. So yeah, there's no real understanding to found with most spiritual people. And when you only think in aesthetics, you have, another mental box. You are tricking slow system 2 into believing that it's working more than it actually is. When you only are caring about how these words feel like, without ever digesting them, then you'll never reach deeper levels of understanding. You're actually just strengthening your limits and remain in your comfort zone. This is what the modern man would call coping. This way, you are caring more about just some underlying social signal, even if it's just relating to yourself. It's like what I did when I didn't want to believe that incest is morally neutral, because it just sounds bad. So you don't want to admit it to others, you don't want to admit it to yourself, and then you just invent some type of word that makes you feel nice. Curiosity stoppers are like virtue signaling, but more boring because they accomplish nothing. Virtue signaling at least makes you look good. You don't need to artistically define every word that you use, but figure out which words are important to you and then give them context in your mind. Everything I've said in this chapter is just really about giving the word deep more meaning. It has richer context for both of us now. This way, words can pack a punch. When you take some time after this video to think about how to live a more meaningful life, I want you to engage this deeply with your own thoughts. I want you to understand what the words that you think about really mean to you. That's how you develop yourself and level up. And it's important to be aware that everybody has their own curiosity stoppers. Because words carry a certain emotional aesthetic, like it's an association of meanings. And if you don't like what a word you think or somebody tells you feels like, you then don't go deeper and you dismiss it. System 1 likes to make words simple this way. So they have the same meanings every time, and you don't understand how many associations are really together, like bind within a word. But how you feel about a word is part of its meaning. If I call your life mediocre, you can really ask yourself if this word fits. If this word doesn't fit, well, maybe your life isn't mediocre. Or maybe you really don't like the aesthetic of it. Figuring this out for yourself is deep thinking. Often it's our education that is preventing us from deeper thinking, because it's other people telling you what something should mean, loading your mind with a ton of assumptions. Education is thought manipulation. Everybody is telling you how to think. I'm doing it right now. That's the nature of all information. I'm trying to manipulate you into seeing the world how I see it. Just that education sounds much more benevolent than manipulation. Also, I believe I'm acting in your best interest. It makes more sense to say education. But even Russian propaganda views itself as educational. So society is always imposing ideas on how a person should behave. Education really means that if you want to be a good human in my social hierarchy, you need to know these things and behave in this certain way. That's our education system. And yeah, it tries to be a benefit for everybody, but especially for those who have set the rules. Our modern education system is a product of the Industrial Revolution. It was there to make us workers, not to make us smarter or to think for ourselves. If you were lucky, you had nice parents that guided you towards your self-discovery and personal development. If your parents were high on the egotistical spectrum, well, now you're likely less developed, more unstable, and your life is overall harder because you have much more negative complexes in your mind which identify with bad behaviors you have. If you had bad parents, you're also much more likely to prefer the aesthetic of the word manipulation than education. When we were kids, we asked our parents deep questions like, why do we exist? They then educated us by telling us that it's God, or the birds and the bees, the Big Bang and the evolution. But nobody had any idea, really. These are just words that try to satisfy your childlike curiosity in the easiest way possible. They didn't understand what these words really mean, because all of these topics you can study for decades, because they are really, really deep. Your parents most likely believed what made them feel most comfortable to not go insane, to give themselves some existential grounding. And the truth is that you should move into a direction of existential grounding over truth if you are losing your mind. Like if you're mentally unwell, survival and security mentally needs to be secured first. This is not necessarily to fall into delusion, but sometimes just moving at your own pace. If you don't find the belief to ground yourself, you become an alcoholic, gambling addict, or a shitty narcissistic parent. There's no reaching self-realization if you can't go outside without having a panic attack. If your mind wasn't filtering out most of the information of what reality is like, you would die out of pure astonishment. The complexity of existence is incredible. It is really astonishing. There are people you walk aside on everyday streets with very profound understanding of reality, unhuman levels of consciousness. They are not common, but they do exist. They have been able to remove a lot of these ego filterings that we do, and therefore experience a reality much closer to truth. Your skepticism towards such people is definitely warranted, because if you have not experienced it yourself, how could you know? But if you lost your childhood curiosity, and if modern Western civilization or modern Western education convinced you that nobody can know such a reality, then this becomes true for you. Whenever you think you can't know something, then you can know. By believing in your limitations, you place a shackle around your neck. It's a quote from the video game Slay the Princess. Highly recommended. Notice how everything about, all of these like consciousness or like more spiritual things, they're kind of like assumptions. And you've been successfully manipulated into believing that we figured most stuff out about reality. Like, this is what Western civilization has done. It just has taken all of the scientific understanding and then it kind of assumes that we are close to some sort of model of reality, while completely dismissing how still surreal and ethereal moment-to-moment experience is like. Because you only lived your own human life. How can you know what's possible? We are so limited as like humans. Yet we still make strong assumptions about what we can know and cannot know. Those who believe that God really exists, they live in a reality where this God is real. And if you're an atheist, well, then you're really certain that God doesn't exist. So instead of resolving this conflict, let's just assume that we can't know. System 1 is happy again. The deeper your cognitive development, the deeper you'll understand the entire universe as a whole. It's the way you filter the information you receive that makes up your reality. When you lose these filters, you can know much more than you thought possible. And there's nobody who can educate you into realizing this. This is true from believing that you can never stop smoking because you're hopelessly addicted to believing that enlightenment is impossible. Education tries to fool you into thinking that only scholars and authorities could possibly have an answer to the ultimate questions of truth. Critical thinking often is to know when to shut up and learn. But it's also to realize that humans are very small in the cosmos. Reality is immensely complex, and science hasn't even understood consciousness yet. In a way, you have more direct access to consciousness than science does. So don't let education put too many filters on your knowledge. But ultimately, truth comes down to what you think knowledge is. If you think knowledge is a thought, then you can't know. I personally don't claim to be enlightened. I can only describe to you what my genuine experience is like. And I know that my experience of life is not normal. I have destroyed a lot of the filters that I used to have, and I describe my experience more like a sort of non-dual awareness, a sense of sensations floating everywhere and nowhere. And since then, I've experienced a lot less suffering than I used to. I know that I might go deeper into this and pursue some actual enlightenment, but I found a good middle ground right now of awakening that is making me quite functional and content, and I don't really feel a need to be anywhere else, just to deepening my understanding and improving my life for myself and others. So when I say words like awakening and the ultimate nature of reality, what I mean is how things truly are, like objectively. No delusions, only pure perception. And if you believe that absolute reality can't be a perception, then you can't ever know reality. Because by your own definition, reality is not something you can perceive. Your cognitive development is how deeply awakened you are to reality. The deeper this understanding, the closer you are to what Buddhists would call enlightenment. All this to say, I'm trying to educate you to awaken to your higher self. Understanding thoughts is a crucial stepping stone to spiritual development. And to do this with care and consideration, we really need to destroy the conflict between science and spiritual thinking. There's no conflict between the spiritual school of thought and the scientific school of thought. The conflict really only exists when you try to act as if both of them have the same goal. Science and spirituality are two paths to understand reality, but they approach things from very different angles. Science examines the external world using our experiences to understand material phenomena. Spirituality, though, turns inward, using our experiences to understand the nature of experiences themselves. Both paradigms fall into the delusion of separation. Science excels at manipulating the physical world, but just misses that our perceptions of external reality is a creation within our consciousness. But often spirituality misses that everything we experience is still interconnected with a real physical reality that you can't just deny or wish away. So only when you're able to jump between these both paradigms, you can find a holistic understanding of both. Many old traditions, like Eastern religions, are not getting acknowledged because our Western society thinks only in scientific terms. And many Eastern sciences, like Ayurveda, neglect the rigor of science in favor of the experiential and individualistic. So keep in mind that there's only a conflict between science and spirituality if your mind is too limited to see the truth in both. To see the truth in everything is to go up the levels of cognitive development. The level of your cognitive development decides what types of thoughts you have. Society has significantly improved its collective cognitive development. Don't let the negativity of social media tell you otherwise. A few decades ago, I would be a slave instead of making this video. If you're a woman, you would not have the right to watch this video. And the average person would likely be fighting in a war or be stuck as a farmer working 16-hour shifts in a cornfield. Not that these realities necessarily need to be worse. I mean, some people lived better back in these days than some people live today. But the fact of the matter is that what has changed is that we've expanded our sense of self to incorporate the realities of more people. Your level of cognitive development is based on how far can your ego understand the reality of other people. This is extending your sense of self and therefore increasing your capacity to understand reality. And what happens when you have a deep understanding of reality? You have higher level thoughts. The reason why most people prefer delusions about truth is because they prefer themselves over other people. And not only that, but they are in denial about it. There isn't the self-awareness there to see how egotistical you are. The levels of cognitive development are how smart you think plus the level of your ego. We will talk about all 8 stages and we will go from lower to higher levels of thought. All what we've talked about so far were already levels of thinking. But it's now introducing cognitive development that I will actually treat it like a leveling system. Because here is where a hierarchy becomes useful and also just a lot of fun to just rank people's thinking patterns. Hilarious. So you can identify which stage you personally are stuck in and how to overcome it, and where you are particularly developed at. We humans have advanced throughout our entire history towards higher levels, and you can actually identify and distinguish the historical times with these levels. I find it super interesting to see. It seems like that our entire human evolution has not just been a biological evolution, but really just cognitively. It's as if our entire human history has been there to move us up into these stages and realize ourselves. So with this leveling system, you have a more direct way to identify from which stage most of your thoughts come from and what needs to be done to overcome it. This is heavily inspired by the theory of spiral dynamics and integral theory, but what I'm presenting here is my own framework divided into 8 levels. But before we can understand the higher parts of ourselves, we need to understand how primitive we truly are. I'm not a violent person, but no matter who you are, if you try to kill me, we'd fight. I'd have literally zero control over this. My instincts just would kick in, and all my thoughts would be just consumed with survival. We all change between different levels of development depending on context, stress, or just personal growth. And these lower levels, everybody has them deeply rooted within them, just for the fact of being human. Our survival is so secured nowadays that we forget that everything we do is about survival. We're not thinking about life or death when we go to work each day to earn a living. We take it all for granted. Only when something horrible happens, we become aware of how precious our life really is. This primitive survival level is our deepest programming. It's level 1 of our cognitive development, and therefore is what brings us level 1 thoughts. All basic thoughts that sustain you come from this stage. Also, your most egotistical and perverted ideas come from here. Self-destructive thoughts are the most primitive part of you working against itself. You likely have an ego that is full of shame and regret when you have self-destructive ideas. These thoughts are like the lowest form of development because they are literally the opposite of your foundation. Most of the time, it's shame that we have not recognized. Shame about our flawed human self, something specific that you have done. You want to come to terms with whatever truth you're not recognizing about yourself. Because you can't deny your ego. It's part of your humanity. Whatever you have done, you need to see for yourself that you deserve love no matter what. This primitive path is crucial. This is our main mode of thinking before we humans developed agriculture and, civilization. It has brought us everything that comes next in these higher stages. So despite how selfish it can be, it has also brought us everything we love. Embrace your flawed humanity. Just don't get stuck here, or you'll have a miserable life. You will see that the higher we go in these levels, the less egotistical they will be. But almost all of them are egotistical at their root. When you become aware that other people have thoughts and desires the same way you do, and that for them their life is as precious as yours is for you, you'll enter the tribal level. You'll start to extend your sense of self to them. But this empathy is highly selective. If they don't have the same beliefs as you do, there will be blood. There is nothing that shows this level more than the Israel-Palestine conflict. I've seen very few people who have genuine empathy for both sides. Not that both sides are necessarily equal, but whatever side you empathize with deeper is your tribal bias. Because why would one human be worth more or less than another? On this level, you only connect with others if they want what you want. You'll form communities around it and demonize everything else. It's fueled with superstition and mysticism throughout history, like when we made human sacrifices for the gods to protect our tribe. But there is a strong sense of community here that is very much valuable. We care about a select group of others as much as we care about ourselves. It's like level 1, empathy. When you have this feeling that you want to be helpful for a large amount of people and you long for a community that supports each other, it comes from this stage. This was a need that got fulfilled by the tribes we used to live in. But nowadays we are so far removed that this style of living basically doesn't exist anymore. And now we all feel isolated and stuck in our homes alone. Of course, we all feel so lonely and depressed. The internet has polarized us into more tribal thinking, which, depending on which aspects of it you strengthen, can be healthy or a recipe for disaster. But what comes after a desire for a community? A desire for power. I tried to find moral objectivity and couldn't find it. I saw that I always could argue everything from both sides. But I didn't want that. I wanted to be right and judge others to be wrong. This was a desire for power over the world. Whenever you find a moral truth and then you judge others for it, it comes from level 3 thinking. Because level 3 tends to be absolutist, dogmatic, and ideological. Being judgmental and authoritative gives you power. It's telling others what to do and convincing them why they should do it. And if there's some moral obligation to do so, well, it's very hard to say no, right? Because they're evil if they don't do what you want. So at level 3, you know what you desire, and you're not going to let empathy stop you. When most of humanity was at the stage, we had a feudal society where one king controlled its peasant. We all were slaves to the king, and there was no way to really question that power. Stage 3 isn't absent in me. Like, I also want power. I also want to influence others, and I'd like to live well. And it's also not like I don't judge people for their opinions. My politics are more left-leaning, and if you haven't guessed, I do have a strong conviction that more left-leaning politics would be better for society. But I won't judge your moral worth for your political opinions. At the end, I really want everybody to just strive and be well. But there's an important jump from level 2 to level 3. You recognize at this stage the importance of other people's beliefs, even if they're not like yours. Instead of trying to exterminate them, you want to convince and control them. Instead of only protecting your tribe, you want the larger society to grow and thrive. You're not locked into your own tribe anymore. Instead, you want to convert people outside of the tribe into your tribe. So first real societies developed under one common ideology, and religions became a force of unison for people. Despite how negative these lower stages may sound, they are crucial parts of what made our civilization strive and survive. And you personally shouldn't dismiss your desire for power and influence either, as long as you keep the higher levels of thought in mind. But more than power, I want peace, law, and order. This is level 4 thinking. When your life is full of uncertainty, or if you have no idea what the point of your life really even is, you likely wish you had more healthy level 4 thoughts. You're looking for meaning in your mind that grounds you. And a lot of people here flock to religions so they can have clear guidance and rules on how to behave. On level 4, there's a sense of objective morality, but not because you came up with it on your own or because you want to judge others, but because God has given it to you. You appeal to an authority figure. And everybody is doing this online. The authority figure doesn't have to be a god. It can also just be a famous person. So we take some figures and then believe everything they say. There are probably plenty of examples you can think of right now. Because thinking what you believe for yourself is so much harder. Especially if a part of a social group that you already are a part of have already the same formed opinion. Being the one who calls them out is being kind of like a disruptor of peace, and you might risk losing your social circle and friends. This is why there is, peer pressure to just agree to things. So most people care about conforming to what their group thinks and just want to live in peace with that. You're ultimately more conscious than stage 3 because you care about the cohesion of society over your own dominance. Monarchies thrived here, and the Catholic Church was in power. At this stage, you don't live for yourself, but for God, your family, and society at large. But this desire also opens the door for fascist and extremist ideologies. Racism online, or just overall over the world, is a product of just lost souls that haven't found meaning in something that they love. So hatred and division it is instead. Then authority figures come in who strengthen hate and division, and they become super comforting. They too desire law, order, and peace, but have a very twisted solution for it. So this goes to anti-Semites, fascist, and racist people. I'm sincerely sorry you got lost in this. There are better ways to find meaning. Instead of falling into one authority figure that unites all, you can realize that you yourself have the answers. You know what you really want and what matters to you. And you want to find out how to become the best at that. This is the achiever self, level 5 thinking. The achievement stage is a high level because instead of the other thinking self, it is more authentic, finding meaning within itself. Achievement-driven thinking uses rationality to advance. It's acting in self-interest, but with the betterment of society as a whole in mind. It's an individualistic stage that cares a lot about self-expression and personal accomplishments. There's a weird tension where status and fame is both egotistical and also there to please other people. Lots of social comparison are going on in this stage. We are in the industrial modern societies now, just after the Western Enlightenment era. So science and rationality thrives, and the military atheist archetype finds itself here too. Shout out to my past self. All of these levels have their own powers and pitfalls, and there's no need to go higher if you're genuinely happy with where you are. Progression is usually not linear anyway. We jump between stages all the time, and we are a mix of a few. The question is just how far does your mind reach to the higher stages, and where are you stuck at? Most of modern society is stuck right here at stage 5. And the reason why is because it is an incredibly empowering stage, especially if you have a healthy way to relate to your successes. If you put in all this work because you have found your own internal compass, you're likely quite healthy. Purpose is found right here for many people. But what often happens with overly achievement-driven people is that suddenly they have an identity crisis. They realize that they've worked only for the validation of others. They wanted to feel worthy. They wanted to prove themselves or to their parents or colleagues or friends how awesome they are. But now they have all the money, all the pleasure and accomplishment, and they still feel empty. Suddenly none of it matters. And you wonder why you did any of this. Many fall into a deep depression here. When your thoughts of self-worth are bound by your accomplishments, you operate primarily on level 5 thinking. But I want to stress, this is where we are right now in modern capitalist society. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just part of our development. It's part of our progression. And if you feel like a failure in life, you do want to cultivate a strong level 5 mind. This is where all this self-improvement desire comes from. Like, all of these self-improvement niches basically live here. And it comes from good intentions. We want to be better for humanity, and we want to be better for ourselves and our families. There's a way to strengthen this part without falling into egoic madness. This is done best by incorporating the next level. Why don't we quit our jobs and go live with harmony in nature? Said the hippies in the 70s. Now you're seeking new age spirituality and inner peace without external attachments. As my audience, you'll likely have a lot of thoughts from this relativistic stage, level 6. You likely appreciate a diverse amount of views and are pretty open-minded. Especially if you made it this far into this video. Jesus Christ, you're insane. This stage is a caring and, open type of thinking stage. You're starting to see everything from kind of like a meta perspective. Instead of judging people for their stupid opinions, you understand the context in which the person has formed their opinions. Maybe you can even look at your own judgment and take this into account when you judge the other person with almost like an eerie clarity from where you are coming from. At stage 6, you recognize the illusionary nature of the self. So you want to be less attached to your internal narrative. And you likely wish everybody, no matter who they are, to live a fulfilling life. Compassion and harmony become the highest virtues, and there's a deep desire to relinquish all human suffering. But you're also likely to be a pretentious, relativistic mess, never sticking out an opinion on anything, not focusing on practical results at all, and thinking that somehow everybody should just stop feeling so much suffering. You might deny the existence of reality altogether and feel we are all stuck in an eternal dream. You also might feel a desire to convert other people to your more awakened state of being, that maybe if you make them see the bigger picture, they won't feel so bad. It is also not uncommon that you have thoughts about hating lower stages. All these evil business people and billionaires ruining our society. Success and fame is truly only for egotistical narcissists, and anybody who has a lot of money has to be evil somehow. It's like on this stage, you recognize the dangers and pitfalls of an overly unregulated achiever ego from the previous stage, but then you fall into a spiritual ego instead. Since we're never stuck in only one level, there are a lot of people who are already wanting to operate on level 6 but actually have skipped stage 5. If you've never had a desire to achieve anything in your life, but you're already trying to reach enlightenment and transcend your humanity, you're going to have a mental breakdown. You can't really let go of your achiever ego and become one with nature if there was no achiever ego to begin with. And this comes completely from personal experience. Like, I hoped I could never accomplish anything and become free from all worldly things, denying my humanity and everything material in this world. But even if you want to become like a monk, most of monks will reject you if you not have some accomplishments or purpose in your life, because they know that if you just come to them and want to be like, okay, let me be a monk with you, and you have like literally nothing to lose, well, you're just using spirituality as an escape. If there's nothing to sacrifice, there's nowhere to grow. You want to be ambitious without being stuck in any previous level. Self-help will only make you feel better about yourself if you have good fundamentals of all stages. You can't internalize high levels if you don't have the basics yet, if you deny your human nature. This is why spiritual insanity is very common. People become ungrounded and way too superstitious on the stage. Not everything has to be a synchronicity, okay? Life is random and things happen. When you become ungrounded, stage 6 becomes the worst prison of them all. It's like being infested with existential poison. Because without even noticing, you are actually spinning way more narratives in your head than before. The ego is attacking you with more and more delusions because it doesn't really want to let go. So you think you're actually more important than other people and that the universe is giving you signs for your transcendence or whatever. It all gets interpreted as if you are actually the main character of this world. You likely can see by now that there's a balance in everything. The better you can think, the more you'll find that balance. And when you have dissolved all these tensions from all these different stages, you'll finally enter stage 7. Now with stage 7, holistic thinking, we've actually jumped here. Everything before was about your personhood. Now we've reached transpersonal levels of thought. It's like a new category. This is true for 7 and 8. Holistic thinking is very uncommon, and only a small percentage of my audience will likely be here. This is awakening. On this level, you've depersonalized from your life to a certain extent. You're not thinking anymore about reality as something that is happening to you, but something that is happening. You see that all levels below are illusionary constructs that your mind has convinced you to be real. Narratives spun from a false sense of identity. But this is not an idea anymore, like in stage 6, but a lived reality. Nothing matters as much as you thought it did, and your picture of reality is far wider now than just your small human self. You have entered the transpersonal levels of thought. There's a pretty cool way to figure out how advanced you are on level 7 thinking. How strong do you identify with this level? Do you feel you are further developed than other spiritual people you know? If your immediate reaction is like, yes, that's totally me, and you can feel like the sense of internal achievement, you're mostly at stage 6. Because it's your ego which makes you feel so identified with the stage. And it's exactly the strong clinging to your identity that is keeping you on the lower stages. You care too much. Because at stage 7, you don't really care anymore about identifying with levels in the first place. They're useful maps. But at this point, you've integrated all other levels as part of your identity. They all are part of you. There's no reason to identify with one more than another. You are not less human than anybody. Only by realizing this deeply can you transcend into the transpersonal thinking stages. It's a matter of recognizing where you are without like this feeling of attachment and identity. The problem is that almost everybody on stage 6 will claim that they're on stage 7. Spirituality is full of people who believe themselves to be better than others, more spiritual than others, and overall less human. The ego on stage 6 is still obsessed about itself, so it will portray itself to be more empathetic, more compassionate, and more selfless. To never get angry and be like above human emotions. It's actually all these desires that make you stuck on the personal levels. You can see how elements of previous stages now are infesting the mind. And they're locking you in. They're preventing you from letting go. But the worst you can do to yourself is to suppress your emotions. When you don't want to recognize how you actually feel and you suppress how you feel, then you enter a spiritual ego. Because this way you can think higher about yourselves because you're above all of these pesky human feelings. I want to stress, it's not that you can't acknowledge where you are. If what I'm saying resonates with you on a deep level because you've never heard somebody spell it out like this for you, it's normal that you would feel identified and be like, yeah, I resonate with level 7 thinking. Just be honest and acknowledge any type of like identification coming up. You're not some cold, enlightened being at this stage, but you can look at yourself with clarity. This system is not about putting you into binary boxes anyway. You've likely had glimpses of holistic thinking even from lower levels. The question is just more, where does your mind think from most of the time? And to which extent can you operate from these higher stages more often? When you're fully on stage 7, you are consistently embodying who you are and understand that you are becoming something new every single moment. Identity has become fluid. This holistic thinking is what actually is the key to authenticity. You are out of the loop and not trapped anymore by your mental prison. You can redefine yourself whenever you want and you can prove it with your actions. The trick is to thinking in superpositions. A superposition in physics is when one atom is like at the same place with another atom at the same time. So yeah, it's almost like a contradiction. So to get to level 7, you want to be able to hold multiple different systems of thought in your mind at once, without having the need to choose between them. This ability to hold different worldviews in your mind at the same time is really the hallmark of a high-level thinker. But this is not about being indecisive. You can let one idea dominate over the other, but you're still acknowledging both. Maybe you let one idea disappear over time because you have no use for it anymore. But it's this ability to not have to take a solid stance quickly, to not have to identify with one worldview while still seeing the truth in it, that makes you a high-level thinker. Your thinking can be both fluid and structured, intuitive and systematic. You can think on an emotional and personal level while also remaining rational and calculated. You can care about power while still being altruistic and compassionate. And I'm sure an utopia will come when we are able to combine spirituality with science. It's a sort of meta-philosophical position where you recognize the limits of philosophy and thought and transcend them for one giant holistic perspective. Instead of separating reality, you see it as one. Because we are all one small part of a larger whole. The interconnectedness between you and me, this video and other videos, the thoughts that this video will cause in you, and the feedback that I will receive, it's all an everlasting, interconnected web of relationships and meaning making. Each and every atom in the entire universe is consistently collapsing into this precise moment. There's nothing that isn't related to each other by the mere fact of existing. We can't dismiss any perspective completely, as all perspectives fit into the picture of reality. If the perspective is being lived, it exists. So, what you feel matters, what you think matters, and what you do matters. The chain reaction of each of our thoughts and decisions fit into a larger whole far beyond our comprehension. But the fact that we can think about these things with such self-awareness, so consciously, shows what astonishing levels of intelligence reality is capable of. Truth isn't something that happens outside of you. It is happening between you and everything else. When you connect with anything deeply and you experience it to the full extent, you can be certain that you're in direct contact with truth. For us humans, reality is made out of distinctions. So when we hear a contradiction, we can't wrap our head around it. A non-dual thought is contradictory. God exists and does not exist. Reality is real, but an illusion. You have freedom of choice, but are completely predetermined. How can something be true and false at the same time? If all what we see are differences, you and me, life and death, believing in these differences defines us. We can't imagine a world without dualities. Like, what would this look like? But the absolute truth has no place for dualities. Reality has to be one whole. It has to encompass all things equally. Whatever tries to be outside of reality would immediately become a part of it, just by definition. Nothingness only exists in the presence of something. Therefore, nothing can't exist. But what is everything if there's no way to contrast it? We are looping to nothingness again. Reality is a giant contradiction. There's no way to distinguish these concepts, because it's the distinction that doesn't exist. Our distinctions come from our human perception. Believing in these differences creates our reality. It creates a division between me and you. But if I asked you, where are you? You can maybe point to your body, but you cannot point to anything that remains constant. A chair exists because we have limited the object as something we recognize as a chair. But if you'd strip away the human filter of perception, a chair would be just quite an exotic shape to look at. Or it wouldn't be even a shape at all. Like, what is the entire universe with nobody looking at it from any perspective? It would be everything and nothing at once. It's completely incomprehensible. So without a point of view that is perceiving, we have the entire universe at once just pulsating, like as a box or a giant sphere. Every life being lived simultaneously. A giant contradiction without any way to resolve it, except to be it. This is non-dual thinking. All what philosophy, science, and spirituality has tried to do is to define truth. But a contradiction can't be defined. The identity of a thing is tautological. This means it is defined by itself and can't ever be wrong. 2 equals 2. Absolute reality, truth, is an identity that defines itself. And you can see it right now. You have direct access to what I'm saying. I'm not telling you to believe me or to follow some ideology or belief system. You are experiencing reality in this precise moment, and you can notice the non-dual nature of it. This is way beyond any levels of thought. This can only be seen in the presence of silence. Whatever you see, life becomes this reality. And your perception of reality becomes your lived truth. It's like there are so many layers of truth interacting with each other all the time. But at the ground essence, there's direct experience. You are one human against an infinite universe. And you're everything you've ever known. So your perception isn't outside of reality. You are it. You are as crucial of a part of it as any other perception. It's like we embody the element of being. Your thoughts and lived experiences are absolutely real. Only in contrast to everything, it becomes like an illusion, a limited thing that defines itself. Reality is a construct that becomes true when you live it. The narratives we run in our heads about who we are and who we are not, who we should be and who we shouldn't be, they become real by believing they are. That's how we get to this genius advice of, just believe in yourself, man. Just believe in yourself. But it's kind of true. But how do we get there? To see how small you are in this infinite sea of just possibility can be scary. So we cling to beliefs. We cling to a sense of self that just makes sense and feels like permanent, without any contradictions or inconsistencies. That's why change is so hard. Because if you change, like, you're almost contradicting yourself. And whatever is outside of like your identity becomes evil because it like literally destroys you. You kind of believe you can die if you change. It's this desire for our identity to survive that defines us, really. So we don't want to destroy these distinctions. That's what makes us not be on these higher levels of thinking. Because we actually have to sacrifice something that we care a lot about, even if it causes us so much suffering. Imagine all possible conscious experiences that are possible. Like, just imagine the sheer quantity of things that are happening each and every second. What is the likelihood for you to be here right now? It's like you're barely there or everywhere. But in the face of the present moment, there's no arguing with reality. There's no thinking about reality. When love hits you, it hits you. And when change hits you, it hits you. Reality is a place that can't be argued with. It can't be thought away. The more you cling to it, the more it hurts. To be truly the highest level of all thinkers is to know when to turn off the mind. To sit down, to recognize its limitation, and to feel what it's like to be here now. Independent of any thoughts that cause you to create differences within reality. To empty the mind of all its storytelling, all its internal narrative. You might see that the only thing you're doing your entire life, the only thing you have been doing and can do, is witnessing and wishing. In the emptiness of the now, you lose these distinctions and you get a new perspective on what it means to be whole. The interconnectedness between everything destroys all separation. Thoughts are only valuable if you also know when to turn them off. Every thought gets its power through silence. In the silence, you'll find truth. In the silence, you'll find freedom. The most beautiful moments of my life were when I looked those who I loved in the eyes and I felt their silence. I'll always remember that love, and it always stays with me. And if you can connect with that love, you'll find that all contradictions make perfect sense. The interconnectedness we share really is the most beautiful thing. So when you share your thoughts and transform them into action, love flourishes. Everybody deep down only wants to love and to be loved. That's all we're trying to do. And when you find out that love is truth, it is quite incredible. And it's like our entire lives, we try to deny that and try to shroud our ego and separate us from this reality. And in order to reconcile that and to live like this dream life in accordance to love, thoughts are the best tool to facilitate that. And love can be everything you feel drawn to. Love isn't a human emotion. Love is connection. It can be found in absolutely anything, because this is what happens when you let go of delusion. Everything else becomes a part of you. Everything else becomes as important as you are. What an authentic life boils down to is the answer to this question: what do you love? This is the most personal and deepest question you can ask yourself. You'll have to question who you are and where do you want to go. What even is that which loves, and how does it get there? Combining holistic and non-dual thinking, you will be able to find the deepest answer to this question. Using first principle thinking, you'll actually move towards that life. Whatever you're thinking of, I also advise you to figure out if it's a genuine desire that comes from within, or if it's a desire that has been pushed onto you by your cultural education. Be very careful when you have a sense of should, like when you should do something. Often other people prevent you to do what you love to do because they have imposed certain shoulds on you. Or there are things you really would love to do and other people's desire block you from doing what you'd really love. Don't let anybody manipulate you out of the life you want to live. Sense what's in your conscience. Feelings like guilt, anxiety, sadness, and depression are guiding maps. They're negative emotions, but they're pointing to something that will fulfill you. Don't ignore them. Also, disappointment is a good tool that directs you to what you really want. You can give feelings new meanings. Doubts become hints. Failures a part of the path. Loneliness, the start of genuine connection. Over time, you become clear about what you love. This conviction then becomes action. Action a habit, and habit transformation. It's because of your incredible ability to think about all of this, to self-reflect, to understand the insane shit we've been talking about so far, that reveals to you who you truly are. Never suppress what you feel to prove something to yourself or anybody else. Letting go of internal resistances and then this tension is letting go of like lower stages and this mental prison and this identity that is so heavy to carry. Some parts of you will have to die so that weakness can become strength. Reflecting about what this means will reveal to you who you want to be. All this ability to redirect our intention towards thought patterns that make us happier is a true sign of intelligence. It's the ability to self-organize into an identity that is both present and moving towards your dreams. Forever confined by itself and at the same time infinitely free. The natural urge to want to self-realize is within everybody. All humans have love in their hearts. The higher you move on the levels of thinking, the clearer that love shines. If you watch this video this far, I'm positive you'll master not only your thoughts, but your life overall. Check out my Discord community that you can find in the link below. I love talking to people, and I'll keep working so I can do this stuff here full time because I really, really care about all of this stuff. And I want to help as many people as I can. Stay aware, and I wish you infinite bliss.